That '90s show was created by Greg Metler and Bonnie, Lindsay, and Terry Turner. A 20 years later spin-off of That '70s Show, a sitcom which was a pretty big part of my teenage years through syndication. And now it's 20 years later, the kids have grown up, and Eric and Donna have a kid of their own. And for the summer, that kid is staying with her grandparents and spending a lot of time in the basement with her friends, just like her parents did in the '70s. My expectations for this were low based on the trailers for it, but I was surprised to see that it was overall decent. I mean, it's still very flawed, it probably needs some more time to develop itself, but at least there's potential. Most of what works comes from the cast of the original. Yeah, most of them return. Everyone except for Danny Masterson, who, let's just say, had other things. Kurtwood Smith and Deborah Jo Rupp are actually members of the main cast as Red and Kitty. The rest of the cast is resigned to cameos, which turn out to be pretty fun, but those are also kind of overused. Individually, many of them aren't as cynical as they could have been, often serving a purpose and even occasionally being the backbone for the entire story of the episode, but they keep doing it and it starts to turn cynical. The new cast is alright, I guess, but they aren't as interesting as the original. Their humor and acting is more hit and miss, and it has that cheesy sitcom feel. I like to think that to really turn this into a worthy successor, the showrunners would have to stop relying on nostalgia and develop these kids into their own thing that's as interesting as the grandparents, but I think the building blocks are there. So yeah, that's all I can really think to say about this. It's been a few weeks since I finished it, and I'm only talking about it just so I have something to pair with Cocaine Bear. This almost turned into my first single review in a long time, but then I saw that this was still on Netflix's trending section. I probably have more to say about Cocaine Bear, so let's just get this out of the way.
Everclear. Just your average band of losers and one-hit wonders. You know, when I was a kid, it was always assumed that drugs were cool. I'd do any drug on the table. It didn't matter what it was. Man, I was wrong. Never talk about the damage it's going to do to you physically and mentally. It takes your life away from you. I threw away 14 years of my life. Sad. I used to be a stupid rock and roll cliche. Don't listen to me. Don't listen to anybody. Figure it out for yourself. I don't know what else to say.
At number 12, it's Cocaine Bear. Yes, this ranks higher than Ant-Man and the Wasp. Oh, what a curse to always be right. Cocaine Bear is from director Elizabeth Banks and writer Jimmy Warden, who previously only wrote for The Babysitter Killer Queen and acted in the first Babysitter in the iconic role of some asshole. It's about exactly what it sounds like, a bear on cocaine, very loosely based on a true story, as in the part about the bear doing cocaine is true and everything else is fiction. It's a 90-minute movie about a 5-minute or so stretch of time where a bear dies of a drug overdose. So, Universal Pictures has really gone all out with weird original ideas these past few months. First with Violent Night, then Megan. I'm kind of tempted to put Puss in Boots on there because it's a sequel to a forgotten spin-off movie with a completely different feel, but I know it really doesn't belong with those two and it's just my bias because I really like that one. And now they made a full-length mid-budget horror comedy about a bear on cocaine. I'd call it a culmination of this bizarre almost trilogy, but since later this year they're also putting out Nicolas Cage as Dracula and Dogs Who Say Fuck, it doesn't really look like they're done with this. And yes, both of those movies had trailers before this one. Universal's newest Fast and the Furious movie had just a short promo of individual shots of the cast, but they played the full Red Band trailers for these ones. They know what the Cocaine Bear audience wants. Also, the Strays trailer ended with the dogs accidentally eating mushrooms and tripping out. But on to the movie. I was a big fan of those previous two movies. I probably liked them more than most people, especially Violent Night. I mean that in terms of how much I liked it more than everyone else, not actual quality. I still think Megan was better. But here, I think I can say that I really liked Cocaine Bear as much as most people who really liked it did. It's not as good as those other two, but it's still a hell of a lot of fun. Most of the public interested in this idea over similar ideas from smaller B-movie companies admittedly probably stems from the fact that it's from a major company, but that's not as bad as it sounds. That means that this actually has good effects and decent acting from people like O'Shea Jackson, Jesse Tyler Ferguson,
character actress Margot Martindale,
and was one of the final appearances of Ray Liotta. What a way to end such a legendary career. But what really puts it above those B-movies is that it was able to get people who actually put in effort to strike a decent balance between horror and comedy, something that's notoriously difficult to do. A lesser movie would be constantly winking at the audience and reminding them that it's an outrageous concept. This is definitely more funny than scary, but it doesn't treat the bear as a joke. He is an actual menacing presence, and there are actually tense scenes here, which I don't think the asylum will do when they inevitably come out with Meth Gator or something. Oh wait, that's real? This is a ridiculously fun horror comedy that the entire audience at my showing was getting into, but there are still some things that leave a lot to be desired. Mostly with other aspects of the writing. None of the characters are really fleshed out. There are a lot of characters and subplots, and it's always interesting watching these stories unfold once they get going, but there's also nobody to really care about. The closest we got was the child characters, surprisingly, but honestly they have better chemistry with each other, but spend most of the movie separated. And I'm not really sure how I feel about the non-linear narrative with the drug smuggler story of before the bear did cocaine playing at the same time as the stories of what happened after. I normally have a weakness for this kind of unconventional thing, but it just feels kind of weird seeing most of the bear's rampage before seeing him actually get to the coke. It also needed a little more bear in the first act, and the smuggler's story was very rushed in the short period between the bear doing cocaine and the climax. Yet another flaw in this non-linear narrative. Also, some of the non-bear related humor was amiss. And finally, the ending is unsatisfying. I guess the human stories have a decent end, but not the story of the bear on cocaine. You know, the story we all came to see, the character they named this whole movie after, yeah, it just kinda ends. I can understand why people might not want to see an ending like the real one. I admit I was kinda dreading it for a lot of the climax, especially having seen some new information. But this just feels incomplete and is no catharsis for any of the horror we've seen. This movie was made for a more over-the-top ending. If any movie deserves a Jaws ending, it's this one. More so than Jaws did. But overall, this is a fun romp about gruesome bear attacks. Yes, this movie is gruesome. It does not skimp on the gore. It's rated R, and the rating specifies that it has drug content, because it's really a shocker that the movie Cocaine Bear would have drugs in it. Although it's hard to imagine any kid who could handle all that other stuff would look at this movie and that's what convinced them that drugs are cool. But anyway, get some coke, a bag of that white stuff, sit back and enjoy. It's a film best experienced with the biggest crowd possible. It's fun, funny, really anything you'd want a movie called Cocaine Bear to be, but have given up on asking for. Cocaine Bear died for this movie to exist. We are eternally grateful. Thy will be done.